people are starting to talk about uninsurable risks. If we think about the Californian wildfires and those type of things, it isn't going to be solved just by sticking some technology, and that's a big regulatory challenge for the market in terms of how I'm going to work with the regulators over there. Can I do more with that product by shaping it in a way that adds more value back to the customer? Can I give them new insights in terms of the way that they are doing things that adds more value than just insurance? I hate digital transformation as a term. I think it's rubbish. It focuses on the wrong things. It focuses on tech and digital and not redoing things, and we don't really do much transformation. We tend to just modernise, like I said, what we're doing before.
I'm building a product to support you if things go wrong. I'm not a nasty person over here. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to tell me what's important in your life, and when the bad things happen, I want to be able to help you.
Welcome to the FintechOS Evolve podcast. We're going to be talking today about the future of insurance. And I've got the very lovely, wonderful, good-looking Daren Rudd from CGI with me. And we've also got Scott here, but I'm sure he's been seen on these shorts before. What, you saying I'm not good-looking as well? You don't need an introduction, mate.
Well, I'm normally in the driving seat like you are, so I'll feel quite relaxed, not having that pressure on me to control this.
Well, so don't feel obligated to say too much.
I won't. I'll just chip in when I need to chip in.
But anyway, you're getting in the way of Daren's introduction. So Daren, would you like to give us a little bit about how you've landed here from insurance and CGI, and give us a little bit about your background?
Sure, thank you very much. And I should probably pay you as well for the lovely compliment and the good-looking side of it. I'm Daren Rudd. I lead the business and technology consulting teams at CGI. CGI are a large global systems integrator, so we help people plan what they're going to do, we help build it, we help run it, and then we help modernise and optimise it as well. 30 years or so in insurance. First half of that was working in the London market for people like Hiscox and Brit. Came up from sort of the business analyst side of the business. And then the second half has been mostly in consulting, although I did a stint in an Insurtech in Stander.
Boo. Don't mention them.
Way back before I then joined Cognizant and then into CGI. And most of my role has been sitting in between the business and technology teams, trying to work out how you apply technology to make a difference in business. But I'm not a deep technical person, even though I've had the title of CTO and architect. I come at it from a slightly different angle.
Well, so look, you'll probably have a lot of common with Scott then, because he considers himself a bit of a wannabe CTO and has no idea about technical competence whatsoever either, do you, Scott?
I couldn't agree more with that, Elliott. I'm sure you are, but
I'm just being silly. So.
Do I need to introduce myself?
Go on really quickly, but people probably know you if they've ever seen this podcast before.
Look, I'm normally in the driving seat, so I'm the one of the insurance solutions directors at FintechOS, and I've been around the block, as you can see, by me grey hair, me sort of extended stomach. So anyway, but more about you. I'll hand back over
to you. Look, if you're 30 years as well, I think Daren's probably handled it a little bit better. He's looking a little bit more fresh-faced than you at 30 years in the industry.
It's cruel.
It's just choices. It's just choices. Mine's beer and curry, so unfortunately.
Clearly had a lot more fun than I had.
Daren's into his fitness. We'll get into this a little bit later. Although he's very reluctant to say he's into his fitness at all. We can talk about this a little bit later. But let's jump in with the first question anyway. So look, obviously this is going to be about the future of insurance.
Sure.
I know you've got a very kind of invested, you're obviously we're all here about insurance. So where's it going? What's it doing? And I know that you guys have been putting some work in on what the trends are for the future. So where do you see insurance going, in the kind of short to middle term? And what do you see as trends for the future that we should be looking out for, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we've just finished our leadership conference, and as part of that, we run a what we call Voice of the Customer, or Voice of the Client, and we've been doing that for years now, and it's looking and taking a sounding with our insurance clients in terms of what they're seeing in the market, what's important to them, how they're going to change. And what was really interesting in this year's, and I've done this now for about 3-4 years, is just the amount of priority the execs are giving to uncertainty in the market, let's call it that. Okay. So climate change, the impact on that, cyber risk, but also the geopolitical position, just the uncertainty in the market on that side of it, and the level of impact that's having on terms of their planning. So I think from one angle, the insurance market is really going to have to think about the resilience in terms of how it's going to manage those really systemic risks that are coming in at the moment. It's the first time really that I can think about that people are starting to talk about uninsurable risks. If we think about the Californian wildfires and those type of things, it isn't going to be solved just by sticking some technology, and that's a big regulatory challenge for the market in terms of how you're going to work with the regulators over there. So that seems to be really coming through. I'd also say we talk a lot about operational resilience at the moment. Obviously, DORA's out, starting to buy it, and again, particularly from the European insurers, we've seen that that's really top of mind as well. I think there's two sides to that I'd say. One is just the level of resources that are being pulled in to deal with that and get everybody properly resilient. It's not easy to do, particularly when we're talking about one of the requirements is going to be got to be multi-cloud. You've actually got to be able to shift and move from one of the big providers to another. That's not something that's necessarily been built into the ways of working. So we've been looking at how we can help customers work through that side of it. But the other side of it is, and it was a comment that came from actually one of our customers, they said, look, compliance is here all the time. How do we actually turn this into a bit of a competitive advantage? Everybody sees it as a tax, but if you think about it from where's your cost model coming in from, in terms of you've got to do the compliance, you can't get away from it, you're in a regulated industry. But how do I do that so that I optimize it? How do I actually apply the technology? Now, everybody loves a bit of Insurtech, reg tech, if you called it that, to throw out a new thing. That's not sexy or cool, but in terms of if you can do it better than everybody else and you can consume all of those changes faster, one, it does give you cost off the bottom line, and the second side of it, what's insurance all about? It's about trust. Operational resilience is about building that trust. So I think there'll be a lot of focus around sort of resilience, and that's an area that we're looking at this year, because I think it's going to be really important. And it isn't just for individual firms, but if you have a resilient insurance industry, you've got a resilient society. And we'll talk about a bit. I know one of the questions coming up is what can we do better in insurance? And I think it's about telling the good side of the story.
Okay. So do you think we do a bad, and I mean this comes up in a lot of the conferences I go to, but do we do a bad job of promoting the good that insurance brings to the world, to people in general?
Yeah. I think that's the basic. I think it's easier for journalists and the media, and I'm not, a bad story, difficult story always sells. No one's going to get on the news just because the insurance is paid out and built their house back or got their business running. But if business interruption insurance isn't paid, like the issues that came out during COVID, that's a story. If someone's house burns down and the insurer is questioning why they should pay for it, then again, it's it's easy to play the insurer as a bad person. But when my kids ask me what I do in the industry and why do I do it, I sort of explain to them that insurance, nothing happens without insurance, which I brought all of my colleagues with at CGI because we work across all the different industries. So, spaceships don't fly without insurance in place. Satellites don't happen. Films don't get made. Those type of things. So it's critical to everything we do. And I just think we do a really bad job of explaining to people how we manage and transfer risk and mitigate risk. And, it allows society to do really big, exciting stuff.
Yeah. And so, look, I think obviously that speaks to the media, which we should get into in terms of the kind of a bad news story sells a lot more than a good news story. One of our clients did insurance during COVID to ensure that films, I think programs for the BBC still got made because they had to have special types of insurance that they kind of did. That's something that I was aware of, but I'm sure, that didn't get picked up by local media. And as you mentioned, that's the kind of good news stories that are out there that we're not promoting, or we're maybe not getting the chance to promote. So it's a
and I think it sort of links in a little bit to one of the other challenges that we've got, which I know is another question coming up later, but sorry, just
don't skip ahead on the agenda here.
Wreck your agenda.
Also,
completely.
this is just a casual chat. There's no agenda as such. What are you talking about?
So again, we tend to be a little bit inwards focused. We all know that we're awesome, and it's a great industry, and I love insurance. I've worked in it a long time, and I wouldn't now move.
Yeah.
I did go out for a little while and came back and just went, I don't like it out there. I like what we do. But I just think we're a little bit too inwardly focused. We've got lots of terms and phrasing, and everybody likes to throw those around. But I just think we don't do a good enough job of starting to tell everybody else what's there. I think there's been some great initiatives. Lloyd's bringing people in and sort of showing other people, a younger generation, what's going on in the market and why it's important. But I don't think we do enough of it.
No, and I think that kind of speaks to something that's just close to my heart in many ways. But as someone who's 41, I feel like one of the youngsters still. We do have a bit of a recruitment problem, I think, in insurance. Bringing younger people in, how can we make it more exciting? And I think Lloyd's, as you specifically mentioned, doing things like the Lloyd's Lab and other programs, kind of getting younger people straight from uni and stuff like that, is a really positive thing. And how can we do more of that, really, to get more youngsters into? Sounds like a silly term, but younger people.
Because I'm hoping, just like in our world of software, same for the insurers. You can't get away on any podcast, any conversation without mentioning AI, agentic AI. But
I was going to try this, Scott. I was going to try. So thanks
put
for
all
that.
that to one side. Given that a lot of the work now, whether it's building products or supporting risk, a lot of it is going to be AI-based, mathematical, which now I think the youngsters are probably more interested in than probably we were. Because when I started off, it was all traditional propensity modelings using GLMs and stuff like that for pricing, which is still in place. But now it's getting more and more sophisticated. So I was hoping that will bring through, because given that I'm not sitting within the insurers, I'm sure the analytical teams are all quite young, capable people now that are coming up with new ideas.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, there's two sides to it. So again, going back to the voice of client results and analysis that we've got, talent is a problem across the globe for the insurers. It's number 3, I think, in terms of the areas of concern. I do think you're right in that when we're looking at the analysis overall, there's a view that AI and automation is picking up, so potentially is going to fill some of that gap. But some of our organisations, clients that we're working with, are talking about the fact that we're heading towards a bit of a talent cliff. You've got older gentlemen like ourselves in the market that are looking ahead. You've still got lots of legacy sitting there that no one really wants to learn, but is intrinsic to the way the business works. And these people are looking to retire. And I think, COVID and other things accelerate
What
that.
are you still saying? There's mainframes and AS400 machines out there?
I love an AS400. It's a
I
brilliant
bet you
machine.
do.
Brilliant machine.
The amount of love I've heard for AS400 in the last week or so. We've actually got a guy in our office who reckons he worked on AS400. I mean, I thought they were all retired, but everyone seems to...
Look, when they were running commercial lines a bit, I was working for London Edinburgh, Aviva at the time, and all of the commercial lines were sitting on AS400 machines, and they worked. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we should say anyway, for anyone who hasn't heard of an AS400, which is probably anyone under the age of about 50, really, but a very old kind of mainframe technology, right? From IBM, I think, originally. Is that right? Or
Yeah. Black box, sit in the corner, would run and work.
It would.
Yeah. Anyway, I do think if you look at some of the, the newer organisations out there, some like Key, which is very sort of algorithmic driven. When I've met the teams there's a lot of younger people. So I do think it's right. You are seeing new areas, but there's a lot of skill and experience still. I'm sure we'll cover AI at some point, but I'm a little bit dubious there in terms of how much that's really going to allow us to replace that experience and understanding that's coming through. So, from what we're looking at, there's a lot of challenges that the execs in the insurers are, in terms of managing and retaining client and attracting the right client talent and the right type of talent as well. But again, coming back to sort of initiatives like Lloyd's Lab and others, there's a lot of activity going on within our clients looking at how they actually get out into the markets and talk to people and attract those younger people. So there's active ways of some of the insurers looking at how they bring in new talent as well and attract them. But it comes back to, I've done a few presentations at my children's school and stuff like that, and you've got to pitch it in the right way to get them interested. I was alongside one really great guy about risk, but he wasn't engaging the kids in terms of why it was important. He loved his stuff, and it was all very sort of actuarial driven and the rest of it. But I don't think he was really sparking why it mattered.
But you can do this, because just think. I mean, look, I'm really passionate about motor telematics, but you can make audiences, young audiences, excited if certain offers come in and you gamify it. That's the story that should be getting told. Is this is how you can benefit if you drive safely and behave nicely on the roads. There's some rewards, but
who's doing that?
Well, there's no one's doing it.
Right?
It's not being positioned like that. It's not being gamified. So I think
because they did have that Aviva thing, didn't they, where you could get your whole family on and compete who was the best driver. I don't know if that ever really took off. They definitely advertised
but Elliott, that's not happening in schools and colleges, is it? It's the last thing you want to go and is talk about how a pricing model works. It's like, what? It's like, what can you do differently in society to make things easier? And there's got to be some reward, or there's got to be something that's interesting, And I've never seen it.
Well, so I think it's probably, however engaging you make your presentation, trying to sell insurance to kids as a concept of, let's go to see the careers advisor and come out and be an insurance consultant or whatever, must be very, very difficult when there's got to be more exciting, I would think. Not in my opinion, obviously I love insurance, but when I was a child, I didn't necessarily imagine myself sitting here. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, so here I am though, yeah.
Well, excellent.
Hold on, but you're too small for a fighter pilot.
I could have probably just about made the height, potentially. But I'm sat here anyway, speaking to you lovely gentlemen. So just changing tack slightly, but still kind of on that. So we're engaging with the customer at the moment who wants to basically put together one product that covers an entire person's insurance, right? We actually spoke to them earlier today, didn't we, Scott? In terms of, you have your health, your life, your motor, your home, your travel, everything in one place, one policy, to cover it all, which is a different take, obviously, on insurance and the way it's sold today, and potentially something an innovation that kind of livens up insurance or makes it easier for the customer, which I think a lot of the time we're crying out for. So, have you got any thoughts on things being done that way? And is that potentially the future?
So, I like it as a concept, because I do think we've got to get away from that product policy view of who we're insuring. But I think we also need to be thinking, and again, obviously I don't know the details, I think it's the right approach to rethink, how we engage with customers. But I think it's also about, why are we doing that, and what problem are we solving for the end consumer? Is the fact that I have to deal with 4 different insurance products once a year really that big a problem? Probably not, particularly if I can do motor and home straight through a comparison website anyway. That will take 10 minutes, or I just let it renew. Health is maybe slightly different. If, though, we really start to rethink, and it comes back to this bit that we tend to sit, I think, in insurance in a bit of a bubble. So we think about the insurance and the product. We forget that actually to really get, and I was talking to our team this morning actually around sort of product-centric thinking, but when we talk about actually building a product, if we think about the data that we have about the insured as a product, then what I mean by that is, how do we create value for the person at the other end, whether it's a personal line insurance or a commercial insurance?
Yeah.
How do we create additional value by the fact that I've now brought all of those products together? I don't think, honestly, it's enough just to take the admin pain away. Can I do more with that product by shaping it in a way that adds more value back to the customer? Can I give them new insights in terms of the way that they are doing things that adds more value than just insurance? So we often think of ourselves as just about, insurance, claims management and risk mitigation or risk transfer. But actually, I think it's the future of insurance is actually thinking outside of our own bubble and saying, right, I've got all of this data. And we always come back to data as well, because I think there's a problem about how we collect the data from clients. But if you're going to bring it all together, I think you've got to do a lot more with that data to add value back to the clients.
Yeah, and so I think, so look, the limited conversations we've had with this entity, it's supposed to be based more around the customer, like you say. It's not a product centric as such. It's okay, you're a customer, you've got 4 insurances, we can do them all for you, or we can. And so there was talk of, well, actually, you've sold your car, so now we'll turn that bit off, but you'll carry on with the rest of your insurances, and it will be a lot more flexible in that regard. Oh, you've bought a new car, well, we can put that on. There's no renewal date; it carries on. So, I mean, it seems their driving force seems to be this will be better for the end customer, which is, I think, obviously what you're alluding to, and I think kind of what we think as well, Scott, that insurance is very product focused. It's not thinking about the end customer as much as it should be. We're just thinking about underwriting and loss ratios and all that stuff. And actually, is the customer getting what they want? I'm not sure they are in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, I think I was at a conference last week, and the team from ULife were presenting. Really, really great. It was probably one of the best presentations that was up at the session.
Will be at our event tonight as well, actually.
Oh, okay, cool. Almost as good as my own presentation, but what I liked about it was they were talking about the fact, a little bit about gamification, but it was more about how do you turn that life insurance thing on its head. So the insurance is the backup. That's the thing when things go wrong. But how do I add new value? How do I create something that means something to the end individual that's much more than just insurance? And I think you're right. If the intention is to use insurance as the risk mitigation factor and the backup, then what do I need to do more to add to be more meaningful to that person's life? I get not everybody in insurance wants to do that. Underwriters, if they love it, underwriting didn't really sign up to, gamify some teenager's life. But if you're going to make them buy more and add more value and compete to other areas, then I think you need to do that.
See, I'm sort of struggling with why the life-centric insurance policy isn't available, because when you think about it, if I've got 3 dogs and I go traveling 10 times a year and I've got 6 bikes and 2 houses and 4 cars, right? At the end of the day, it is painful. They're all separate policies and everyone offers different prices, and I'm sure all of the insurers have benefited from carving it up. But there is the data there to support that single risk. Because if you think about it, and this has been talked about for a long time, and I'm sure there's a lot of regulatory issues getting in the way, but if you look at it, the telematics is me behaviour, is how I drive. It's there. We've got your shopping behaviours that are all there. We've got all the Amazon data. We've got your buying data. We've got your NHS health records. It's controversial, I know it is, but if you look at the key fundamentals of insurance, which is risk, the person and what they do in life and the products, the data's there to support it. How you get a hold of it and bring it together. So it's capable and it can be done. The only question is producing one policy at one price to cover your lifestyle, or even though it's beneficial to the to the customer, is the insurer making enough money from bundling up as opposed to separately distribute? And I don't know. I don't know the answer, because the answer, the reason why it's not available is not because lack of data. The data is there. It's just that I don't know if people have brought it together and said, one policy for your whole lifestyle, and you can swap and change at anything. You can do anything, and we'll constantly be repricing.
Yeah, I mean, over my career I've talked to underwriters and teams that have looked on that concept. I'm no underwriting expert, so I'm not going to get into sort of the price and mechanics of it. I think actually probably one of the biggest obstacles is the more traditional policy admin systems. in the fact that
I was going to say legacy tech. And let me just say at this point, FintechOS is designed life-centrically, isn't it? We have done a lot around that. So as a little plug at the moment, we can support a life-centric policy, but I'm sure there's a lot of legacy tech that can't, yeah?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that just because I'm on your podcast.
Yeah.
But I actually think that a lot of when we talk about modernisation, what we often do is just say, okay, I'm just going to digitise moving paper around the industry. That's what we do. We assume that this data policy, proposal form appears at the edge of insurance. We then might digitise it, but we then move that paper between different teams to send another bit of paper back to the client. And then when there's a claim, we get another bit of paper coming in. Now, okay, it might all be cool tech and AI is helping us do it around, but that's how we think about it. So, and as good as modern policy admin systems are, and there's lots of legacy as well, but they're all designed with that premise in mind. So if you're going to break things up and change it and completely rethink stuff, then you've almost got to go right to the core of the policy admin systems and say, why do we always build everything around that one platform and assume that's the only way to do it? And I get, I'll have loads of architects shouting at me that, it's really difficult to bring multiple different functional components together and make them all work. We've tried that with SOA and various other type of ways of working, and microservices are great in certain areas but are a nightmare to run in others. So I get that there are technical challenges, but we sort of fundamentally keep coming back to the fact you have to have this one big monolith sitting in the middle, which then creates problems like you're saying in terms of then how do I restructure my products or my policies if it's all got to live in one place? Do we really need one single system? I used to chat to the CIO of one of our big clients, and we always used to have the debate about why do we still need a policy admin system in its original sense if it's all about data. And I know there's some really interesting systems out there at the moment looking and saying, well, do we take a data-centric point first and build everything else around it? And when you look at the models that I'm seeing, even with sort of the big insurers, they might have just upgraded to one of the big platforms, but then they're building all of the competitive edge around, competitive advantage around the edges. They'll build something in Salesforce because that's quicker to do other things, or build another platform at the edge. So it sort of says that we've got it not quite right in terms of how you want to manage that. That's the way I sort of look at it at the moment. And there's no single right answer either. That's the problem. It's complex. I get that too. There's no simple answer. And agentic AI is not going to fix it all either.
Good. I'm glad you said that. But look, so this moves us on to the next question. Obviously, was around Insurtech and the future of Insurtech quite nicely. I think there is a host of other reasons besides just the legacy tech why a single policy for everything probably isn't going to work. But as we've only got 17 minutes left, and these lights and this waistcoat are making me sweat quite a lot. Let's not run over, guys. In terms of the future Insurtech, I guess where do you see that going? And I'm also interested to Insurtech's been around a long time now. What does Insurtech really mean now, and what does it mean to you? I guess really.
It meant something a while back when I was in Insurtech, and you were doing something different for the first time. But lots of companies call themselves Insurtech and they've been around for years. And I think it's probably less important about talking about Insurtech because I don't know that it really means what it used to mean. There's still lots of small companies doing innovative things and getting PE funding and startup and coming in differently. I think it's probably more important to talk about what we have been doing really in terms of how do you reimagine what we're doing in insurance and how do you use technology to drive that. I do like the fact that if we talk about Insurtech more in terms of bringing in outside thinkers who look at the world differently from we do in insurance, and we've all been around in it a long time. As hard as we try to reimagine and rethink it, you can't get away from the fact we've been looking at it for the last 30 years and we're probably missing stuff. So I think Insurtech is really about people coming from the outside and looking at it and going, let's think about this and do this differently. Key is one of those examples where a lot of people were brought in that weren't from the industry. I remember meeting some of the guys early on and they had some brilliant ideas and you sit there going, that's never going to work. You just don't understand the market, but they've made it work. and it's doing really well, and they're expanding. And I just think that's what maybe we should be talking about in terms of Insurtech. Maybe it's insure rethink. I don't know, crappy term.
So Insurtech, I think originally was supposed to mean technology-based kind of MGAs or brokers or whatever, someone actually selling insurance, whereas I think it broadened out into, like you say, kind of anything and everything at one point. Like, I'm much more tempted to say insurance technology these days and kind of leave Insurtech in the past almost, because it's so broad now that it's everything, isn't it, really?
And that, there aren't that many businesses that don't need technology. So I don't think there's any insurer in the market at all that's not using tech. Even the hardest, toughest syndicate isn't sitting there without some sort of technology there to make it work. So I think it's more about looking at technology in the right way to force ourselves to rethink what we're doing, rather than just. I hate digital transformation as a term. I think it's rubbish. It focuses on the wrong things. It focuses on tech and digital and not redoing things. And we don't really do much transformation. We tend to just modernise, like I said, what we're doing before. So I think if we're really going to sort of find something exciting, then Insurtech should mean rethinking, really radically pushing ourselves to rethink what we're doing. Would be my call. I don't know. Scott,
no, fair enough.
What do you reckon?
Scott, you must have some thoughts on this.
Well,
try not to mention AI too much.
Well, but I suppose one of my issues I've got with this is it is a funny word, but like fundamentally, when I joined insurance in 92, the ability to quote and price and produce documents and produce risk, nothing's really changed. The algorithm is still the same. It doesn't matter. I mean, we can talk about generalized linear models, trees, nets, gradient boosting. It doesn't matter. It's all maths at calculating the risk. Nothing's really changed. The only thing that I could say is the ability to build a product and launch a product is much quicker these days. It's super fast, right? You don't, whether it's cloud-based or not, or whether it's on-prem, whatever, choose. It's just the ability to build and come up with new products. That's where I see the big changes are at the minute. It's the speed, and what I've also seen, having not just worked for FintechOS, but the ability to do, and we talk about a lot, is around hackathons and boot camps. And I still think that's the platform that will allow organizations to release more tech, more capability. Is that test and learn, fail. And that's come up super easy because of the hyperscalers. You can spin up an environment and you can shut it down instantly. And that capability wasn't necessarily there so many years ago. So I think the tech for me is more about how we can test and learn and fail and build things, bring them down and move on. That's what I see.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that ability to, like you say, build, test and learn and then reiterate, that the challenge there is getting people to rethink culturally how that works. Because if you talk to most, we get it all the time, an underwriter who's been around in the market and been promised stuff from tech multiple times, the view is you get one shot. So I'm going to get one shot to get everything I need into this project because it will run late, it'll get delivered once, and then nothing will change for the next 6 years because it's moved on. So they've been bitten too many times. So the promise that I'm going to do something, it won't be entirely right, I'll do it in 3 months, and then we'll do another release in 2 weeks' time or a month's time. That's, there's not a lot of trust that that'll happen. So you have to sort of prove that. But I agree with you. I think that test learn, but it's also about going back to understanding what the customers want and being out there willing to test it and find it. The other one I would extend though, I think the other big difference is data. And you mentioned telematics, smart buildings. I mean, I was doing smart building stuff with one of the big reinsurers 15 years ago. Tons of data out there in terms of buildings and commercial. We still need to be able to bring that in more to drive those algorithms and actually then change the nature of the fact I'm not just pricing once a year or once a month, but I'm actually looking at creating a feedback loop there in terms of helping that risk mitigation, whether that's nudging a teenager to be a bit more sensible about how they drive, or you could, I talked about it ages ago, you could potentially have a AI advisor to a business that's saying, I think you need to be looking at this. All of our data is telling us if you keep going down this route, you're going to run into business interruption problem. Or, your creditors, your supplier is going to default on you. Yeah. So I want to give you that information. And that's where I come back to that point of product, data as a product. How do I create more value for my customer by creating that feedback loop? So I do think you're right, it's testing and doing the data, doing the release of product and design, but also creating that feedback loop, not just from customer feedback, but also that data feedback. And we're not used to that in insurance, interacting in that way. We've handed a lot of that interaction off to third parties. When you think about claims, most of the claims are run by an adjuster, not the insurance firm.
Yeah. So
if we're going to move to this preventative model, I talk about moving from a reactive to a preventative insurance model. If you're going to go that route, you've got to completely change your operating model to allow you to do that. And I think that's fundamentally, you've got to break down the way we think about insurance, which is, cultural change is hard.
Well, so I think you need different people and different mindsets I guess that's kind of diversity, isn't it? But you need different people than your standard. If I'm a company of loads of underwriters, I think about policies in an annual term, probably with these specific, risk items. But you have to have people that are thinking in a different way, potentially from outside of insurance, to kind of move that culture in a different direction, I think, as well, don't you? Yeah,
I think it's good to get an amalgam of the outside thinking challenges and then the old fogies like us who've been around for a while and seen what doesn't work, but be willing to listen and try stuff out, because I think the two together work well. I don't think it works so well when someone comes from completely outside and goes, well, you guys are stupid, there's definitely an easier way of doing this. There's always a reason why something doesn't work or hasn't worked, or an obstacle that isn't necessarily obvious that you've got to overcome. So bringing those two together, I think, allows you to change a bit faster.
Okay, and look, so I think this is great for the next question in terms of, okay, so what do you think's holding insurance back? And on the basis of, well, it doesn't have to exactly match that answer, but what would you change? If you could wave a magic wand and change something in insurance to make it better, what would that be? And Scott, I'm sure you've got a lot of things to say about this. You can probably go after it.
So I do two simple things, I think. One, we need a bit more outside-in thinking. Now, I'm not saying that from an insurer point of view or a broker point of view, we don't think about the customer, but we think about the customer from a insurance point of view about, the products and the risk mitigation and risk management that we provide them, not how can we add additional value? How can I make their life easier to then make it easier to take the insurance products that we're offering? So that would be one. I'd like us to sort of rethink that. And the other one is just get better at telling people what an awesome industry insurance is, and why. Tell more good stories.
Yeah.
Actually get out there and show why we make a difference and why we allow things to happen. Organisations, businesses, individuals take risk and do exciting things. I think they're the two that I'd change.
Fair enough.
Scott?
I think I'm going to go on to the theme of life-centric, because I think the way insurance has always been pitched is, by law you need certain policies if you want to do certain things, whether it's cars or whether you want to take your mortgage out. And I think people always feel that insurance is a required evil that you've got to go through, and I would like to change that. And I think that life-centric approach is where I'm building a product to support you if things go wrong. I'm not a nasty person over here. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to tell me what's important in your life, and when the bad things happen, I want to be able to help you. And it's not really, insurance isn't perceived like that at the moment. And that's what I would like to change. And I think if people start perceiving it like that, you'll find a change in the market. Because look, do we all like paying insurance? We only like paying insurance when we have that claim and go, thank God I've done it, and thank God I'm covered. But even then, you still have the fights. You still got to have the fights about whether you're going to get covered or not. Whereas I think that life-centric, if it's if it's a nice, clean, tidy relationship between you and the insurer to say, I'm here to support you, then I think perceptions will change. But I mean, it's hard. It is hard.
And so what do you think's holding? Well, I guess we've done the holding it back on the life-centric thing, aren't we? There's a number of different reasons we already touched on.
Look, data supports it, products support it. There's just the willingness to get it done. And like we said, we've had conversations there with customers. It's changing.
Do you think it's a mindset thing?
It is a mindset.
Within organisations specifically, especially if you are I don't know how many years old, say a 50-year-old insurer, and the people at the head of the business have been doing the same thing for 30 years. Do you think it's a cultural thing?
I think some of it comes to the fact that, the change starts at the edge, and it, you're not going to radically change these multi-billion-dollar companies who are reasonably profitable and making money by radically rethinking the business model they're in. Change just doesn't work like that. But around the edges, you'll see the shift. And I think you're right. Over time, people say, well, hang on a second, that works. So, big transformational change doesn't work. It can't change an industry like that. So you've got to work around the edges, and then hopefully that edge will slip faster in terms of people seeing that there is an opportunity there.
And let's be honest, has it been proven? Look, all these companies have to make money. That's what they're all doing it for. So has it been proven yet that the life-centric policy has got a good loss ratio with it? We don't know because it's not there yet. And I'm sure if you found out that it's a good one, it's a, I don't know, 60% loss ratio, it would be, people will start jumping on that bandwagon. But until we know what it is, we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think, Scott, you got one of these policies. Why bring it up? I've just taken out new car insurance with Admiral. They do like a multi-car. I think you can even add your house to it. So, so that's a foray into almost like a start for that, I guess, in one of the biggest insurers in the UK. And potentially that grows into a life-centric insurance, I guess.
But when you have a look, I mean, Admiral's a classic case. I mean, because they've got travel, they've got pet, they've got motor, they've got home, they've got multi-car. They're in an ideal position to test and learn with this product if that's what they want to do, and if the figures are right and it stacks up and it works, then because they've got the reach, they've got the customers, just haven't got the product built.
Okay, great. Well, so look, we have got very little time left, but I did want to just jump on to Daren. You're a keen attender of my run club. We've got to get the run club in there. Hopefully you're coming on Tuesday, but you've already told me you're not actually. But in terms of, I think you've got a challenge coming up, so just talk to us a little about your health and fitness challenge and how that's coming along.
So you get a little bit older, you've got to look after yourself a bit. I know we were going to talk about embarrassing moments as well. Your first run club actually was probably my most embarrassing, because I turned up to because it's obviously meeting people in the market and networking. I could barely get 2 words out during the 5K run, and that sort of told me. I'm also definitely one of the fattest people in all the photos, which is why I stand towards the back. So I'm there doing some new stuff to try and get myself fitter and running. And the challenge I've got is to do some stuff with some friends to just challenge yourself, and I think that's been good to have that sort of goal to get up there and canoe and bike and hike around the Dorset coast next weekend.
Okay, well, so look, hopefully this goes out before then. Have you got a fundraising page or something like that we can put a link to? Let's definitely do that. But that's all we've got time for. We have run out of time, but it's been a pleasure having you. As Scott, always dead average having you, but thanks anyway. And that's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Awesome.
Thanks, Elliott. Thank you. Cheers.